Hello, Tiger faithful, and we are episode another week looking forward to LSU football. And I'm your host this week. I'm usually the co-host, but I'm filling the shoes of Chet. He's out for the week on a business trip. If you listen to Sports Scramble, so my host tour just continues on. The ESPN car wash rolls on, but I have a special guest. You see him on our Sports Scramble, our main show, and also SEC Talk. So, Wade, how you doing?
Good. I'm happy to be making my Bayou Bengal Bite debut here after another great week of football and to preview the action ahead.
Yeah, we got a lot to recap. First, we'll get into the Arkansas game, and then we'll shift gears into Ole Miss. We'll be recapping the Arkansas game. All right, so the LSU versus Arkansas battle of the Golden Boot. The line was 17.5, and you were absolutely crazy for thinking if
That was
LSU
rat
was going to
poison,
win.
man. No
17
way.
and a half. Rat poison, as Nick Saban likes to say. But this game always comes down to the wire. Your Fighting Tigers of LSU do come away with a victory, 34-31. But boy, this was not pretty at all. This was a 13-3 game in the first half. The offense struggled. KJ Jefferson, the quarterback for Arkansas, had a tremendous game. But this LSU offense was the story of the first half. Just struggled to move the ball against Arkansas defense. Coming off of a game, we talked about it, Chet and I did, gave up 38 points to BYU. So we were expecting this to be a higher scoring game, but more on LSU side and not on Arkansas side. So you were at the game, Wade. Tell us a little bit about what your point of view was of this game.
Yeah, I think you hit it. LSU started out a little sluggish. Jaden Daniels was leaving some balls short, underthrowing his receivers, and it just looked out of sync. And the run game wasn't able to get established. But after a while, LSU got some rhythm. Andre Sam had a huge interception, and Jaden Daniels started to connect on some deep balls to Brian Thomas. And a couple nice slant routes to Malik Neighbors as well, getting both of his top receivers involved. And then Josh Williams, he had that 40-yard run. I think that was the first positive momentum LSU had in the running game. And I think that Logan Diggs also feeded off that, just had to get it started. And then this LSU offense was as good as it's been all year.
I think really what I have noticed is that Deshaun Womack has really stepped into his role. You know, Mason Smith coming off of an injury. I don't know if it's rust or not, but Smith has really not been existent. We saw Harold Perkins get a couple of tackles. It wasn't that Harold Perkins game that we saw last year against Arkansas where he was just all over the field. But I think the story in this one was the receiver stepping up. You know, last week against Mississippi State, Malik Neighbors had that insane game. He had over 130 yards but this week it was Brian Tier really getting that because they really needed that. Jane Daniels hitting him on a 49-yard catch to end the half to go into the half 13-10. That was definitely a boost of confidence and a boost of momentum to Jane Daniels. Daniels did finish with 4 touchdowns and 300 yards passing. Like you mentioned, Logan Diggs was the leading rusher. So that's definitely nice to see if you're a Tiger fan. You know, usually we're so used to seeing Jaden Daniels being the leading rusher every single week, but you saw this week that he was more staying in the pocket. Didn't really see him go outside of the pocket and try and beat his legs against Arkansas. So this was definitely a good win. The Tigers now moved to 3-1 on the season, 2-0 in SEC play. And let's get into a little bit of our awards from the LSU versus Arkansas game. All right, let's get into our annual Tiger on the Prowl Award. We debuted this last week. It continues on. Since you're the guest, Wade, who is your Tiger on the Prowl Award winner for week number 4?
All right. My Tiger on the Prowl goes to Brian Thomas Jr. I think, like you said, he really set the tone for this game, helped Jaden Daniels on a couple balls that maybe weren't Jaden's best, but he made the play and juked out some defenders and had 2 long touchdown grabs in this one. You know, Malik Neighbors has been fantastic. He had another great game on Saturday, but I think Thomas is kind of what got this offense pumping. And, I think that they're as good of a duo as anybody in the conference.
Yeah, definitely. It's looking like one of the best wide receiver duos in the country and in the SEC. I definitely like that pick. I'm going to go on the defensive side. We always like to go with one offense and one defense for this award. I almost went with Deshaun Womack. He definitely put the Womack on the Arkansas Razorbacks, but I'm going to go with Andre Sam. I think that the story of that first half after Jaden Daniels, his pass was picked off by Dwight McLaughlin, which I'm sure that LSU fans know who he is. McLaughlin was on this LSU team. He transferred after Coach O was fired, so he's now in Arkansas, and he definitely had a good game. He had a little pushing and shoving with Logan Diggs before LSU kicked the game-winning field goal. But I think that Andre Sam, that interception after Kate, it really could have just went down the drain if Arkansas, they were driving and Andre Sam was able to get that interception and LSU was able to strike with their offense. So I think that Andre Sam, I know that we're talking about the cornerbacks. It's been the story of the town. You know, Deuce Chestnut has been there. He was definitely the MVP of the Florida State game. And then moving forward, it hasn't really been that guy. You know, Denver Harris made a couple of good plays against Mississippi State, and then we saw it again against Arkansas. But it's looking like he's definitely laying the boom on these wide receivers. And I think that he's slowly becoming the cornerback one for this, cornerback group that's had some young talent, but it's definitely trying to improve week in and week out. You know, there are some times where they couldn't cover, especially number 9 of Arkansas, that tight end.
Oh, man, he was tearing it up.
Running for 200 miles on Saturday night. So the secondary definitely has a lot of work to do, but it's good to see guys like Andre Sam step up in their roles. All right, let's shift gears for now, talking about Arkansas to the next opponent, which is going to be on the road. It's time to meet our opponent for week number 5. LSU continues this SEC gauntlet. You know, we've had Mississippi State, Arkansas on back-to-back weeks, and then you hit the road for 2 straight weeks. This week you get Ole Miss. Next week at 11 a.m., we'll talk about that in our Round Town news about the Tigers facing off against an early test in Missouri. So meeting our opponent this week is the Ole Miss Rebels. Before we get into this year's matchup, I do want to talk about last year's matchup, because last year's matchup was absolutely insane between these two teams. If you remember a year ago, Ole Miss was 7-0 heading to this game. They have all the talk about possibly taking the SEC West, with Alabama kind of struggling early on, and then LSU already had 2 losses, one to Tennessee and the other to Florida State. So in that game, Ole Miss was leading that one 17-7, if you remember. And then in the second half, Jane Daniels really took off that offense. I think that Daniels was one of his best games last year. And we also saw Josh Williams get involved as the Tigers went on to win that one 45-20. Don't necessarily think that it's going to be that big of a rout this year. So looking at Ole Miss's opponent, they are also 3-1 on the season, along with LSU. They do have some pretty quality wins. Their one win that I really look forward to is the Tulane game. Now, a lot of people are going to say, they beat Tulane without Michael Pratt. That's not really a good win. But, I mean, Tulane definitely gave them a run for their money. Ole Miss coming off of a loss against Alabama. All the people were talking about, this Alabama offense with their quarterback position. We ended up seeing Jalen Milroe in this game, and Milroe did find some holes in this Ole Miss secondary. I think that's the same way that LSU is going to have to attack Ole Miss. So what are your early thoughts about this Ole Miss versus LSU matchup?
Honestly, I think Ole Miss is going to present a lot of unique challenges for LSU. I think that they can really stretch the field with Jackson Dart, and I think that presents potential exposure of a weakness for LSU. I know that you mentioned Andre Sam stepping up, Denver Harris is kind of rounding into form, but this defense has to come out ready and alert, because I think Ole Miss is going to try to take some shots down the field and seize momentum early at home. Defensively, I think this team's kind of up and down. I mean, they did hold Alabama to 24 points. That's respectable. Alabama's not as good offensively as they typically are, so it's kind of hard to gauge. I think both of these teams are pretty evenly matched. I think Ole Miss is a little upset about last year's game. I think that they'll come in with some fire. I think this game gets into the 30s. Not necessarily because of great offense or bad defense. I just think that that's just the nature of it. I think it's going to be punch for punch. I think it's going to be close. I've been calling Ole Miss all week. I'm kind of having a change of heart. We are on an LSU-focused show. I don't want to make a prediction, but I do think it will be under 7 points, and I think both teams will creep into the 30s.
All right, I definitely agree with that. This could definitely be a high score matchup, and let's dive right into this Ole Miss team. We know about their offense led by Jackson Dart. They do have some talent behind them. Spencer Sanders, Oklahoma State transfer, then Walker Howard. He transferred from LSU to Ole Miss. So their quarterback room is absolutely stacked with talent. They're led by Quinshon Judkins. In the running back room, Judkins really hasn't had. He's kind of had a sophomore slump season. I don't want to say, his freshman season was absolutely insane. It's like he's having a
He
bad
averaged
season.
like 200 yards a game.
Yeah. Yeah, but coming off of Alabama game, 13 carries, 56 yards. Dart, on the other hand, threw for 244 yards, but 0 passing touchdowns. I don't think that's going to happen in back-to-back weeks. I think that Dart is definitely going to be motivated to have a bigger game. And then Jordan Watkins is definitely going to be a wide receiver to watch. He's slowly becoming their wide receiver one. He's a veteran. He was a former transfer. On the defensive side, though, I think that the defensive line of Ole Miss is where they thrive. Their secondary has talent. But I feel like Ole Miss versus LSU secondary, they got a little bit tested in the first couple of weeks. We saw Ole Miss secondary. Jalen Milrow was able to take some deep shots, especially to his wide receiver. So I think that's definitely going to be a key. This LSU secondary, Ole Miss secondary, whoever can create more turnovers. But looking more into the numbers about the Rebel team, this is a team that averages 42 points per game, which ranks them 12th in the country. Ole Miss's offense also averages 470.3 yards per contest. That ranks them 22nd. And then penalties is also a big issue for Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin, not much very disciplined with this team. 225 yards of penalties on 25 infractions. That gives them 53rd in the nation. And then on the defensive side, they're allowing 18.5 points per contest. Third, which ranks them 36 in Division One. So that's a little bit about the numbers about Ole Miss. Now let's get into our keys to success. Keys to success for the Tigers versus the Rebels. I think it's always, we talk about it, this game is one of the trenches. It's playing the SEC. Big boy football is going to win this one. I think that where Ole Miss is going to live is their defensive line versus the LSU running game. I think that's going to be the key to this one. The LSU running game we talked about in the shows, there's not really that true running back one. Some fans are saying it's Josh Williams. Other ones are saying Logan Diggs. I'm kind of more on the emphasis that Diggs is starting to become that quote unquote RB1. We've seen a little bit of sprinkles of John Emery Jr., but coming off, that couple of games where he's missed, I just don't think that, he has the talent, but just hadn't been able to put it together. And then Armani Goodwin has been dealing with some injuries. So I think that's going to be the main key is LSU's running game. Can they get going? Because you cannot get one-dimensional against Ole Miss. Because I think that, looking at this Ole Miss defense, looking at their stats, they are definitely going to want to push the ball downfield. So I think that Jane Daniels, once again, is going to have to push the ball downfield, hit Brian Thomas, hit Malik Neighbors. So that's my key matchup to watch. Wade, what's yours in this game?
I think it's that secondary, honestly. I just think Jordan Watkins and some of these experienced Ole Miss wide receivers, can they challenge LSU offensively? Can Jackson Dart hit them on a deep route? So that's what I'm looking forward to. I think if the crowd and the Ole Miss players get into, Denver Harris's head or Zy Alexander, I think it could be a long game for the Tigers. But if they can come out disciplined and get a quick stop, get a 3 and out, I think that it could go a long way for LSU.
It could definitely go a long way, and they can't do what they did last year, getting down 17-7. I just think that this is a team. I think they cannot start slow at all. Like against Florida State, it wasn't really a slow start. They had the lead at the half, but in the Arkansas game, they got out to a very slow start. You cannot afford it against Ole Miss offense that can just beat up on you every single play. So I think it's got to be more similar to what we saw against Mississippi State. If they have to stop by an hour and they're going to stay in Memphis, that's what they're doing. Their hotels in Memphis, and they're going to take a bus trip. So maybe, they take a page out of their Mississippi State and go to a car dealership, try to stretch it out, get ready for a 5 o'clock kickoff in Oxford. It's definitely going to be the environment is definitely going to play in this. Last time these two teams met in Oxford wasn't even close. So I think that this is going to definitely be in a challenging environment. It's not like the 100,000+ fans that you see in Death Valley, but they're going to be motivated. They're coming off of a loss. This is going to be a pissed off team, especially, they didn't look their best. This was a game that they looked like they had one in the first half, and then they got it really away from it from Alabama. So let's go ahead and give our prediction. I know that you said that it was going to be close, but you're not going out of here with a score prediction. So who wins this game between the Tigers and the Rips?
All right, I'm going to flip to LSU 37-31.
That's exactly around the range that I was thinking of. I think that this is going to be a lot of points scored. Like I mentioned, I just don't think that Jackson Darling's offense is going to have two back-to-back bad games in this one. I think that both secondaries are going to be tested. It might come down to the LSU Arkansas scenario where whoever has the ball last and kicks the field goal, they win. So I think it's going to be a field goal game, 37-34. If you look at the spread, it's definitely way lower than last week. It's right on
good.
3
That's
points.
fine.
Right on 3 points for LSU. They are the road favorite. So this is definitely going to be a big game. I think that this is one of the key games that you look at. Look forward. You have Missouri on the road, and then you come back home to back-to-back games. Auburn. Auburn's offense is looking too great. And then you have Army, and then you have the bye week. So if LSU can win this one, get to 4-1 to Missouri, win that one. I think that if you win both of those games, I think that LSU is really going to be set up for a showdown in Tuscaloosa to maybe decide the SEC West again. So a lot of football to be played, but we're both picking the Tigers to beat the Rebels on the road. So let's get into one more segment before we conclude the show, and that is Around Town News. Let's get into some Around Town news. It has been a busy week in the Red Stick in Baton Rouge. A lot of things were happening over the weekend. Yes, right there you see on their shirt. Of course, the big story was LSU getting the win over Arkansas. And we also had our men's and women's basketball teams get it going in practice. Kim Mulkey and her squad is ready and reloaded, trying to get another national championship and hang another banner in the PMAC. On the other side, men's basketball is trying to come back after 2-16, disappointing in the SEC. With a lot of the unquestioned marks of Will Wade. Well, now Will Wade's in McNeese, so that dark cloud is now shifted to Lake Charles, so they can now deal with that. But other news was that the LSU baseball team, they had the number 5 recruiting class. So the LSU, they lost Dylan Cruz. You lost a lot of MLB guys, but you are going to be reloading. Jay Johnson has hit the transfer portal hard and has one of the best recruiting trails in the week. And another news to get to is Jane Daniels once again was the SEC Offensive Player of the Year in the week. So that is the Around Town news. A busy week in Baton Rouge. Is definitely going to get busier. Football season's rolling on, and then once we get closer into November, the basketball teams will get going. Softball in the spring, baseball. All it's Bayou Bengal Bites is always going to be year-round talking about our purple and gold. So we appreciate everyone for tuning in, talking a little bit about the Arkansas matchup, and also looking ahead to the Ole Miss preview. So hopefully next week we're talking about a W and not a loss, because if it's a loss,
I'm not allowed back
to be
on.
out of the college football playoff race. So hopefully they can keep that going for us. So that's going to be it. We appreciate Wade for joining us. We'll definitely have him back on the show if Chet misses. So that's going to be it for Bayou Bengal Bites, and I'll hit you with a Go Tigers.